trying to work around the legs.
Mhm.
All right. Let me remove that. Make us big, and here we go. So I want to take a moment once again. Thank you for joining Love Over Coffee. Voices Now Heard. This is a platform and a podcast for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. I want to take a moment and introduce to you my guest tonight, a dear friend, Gina Medico. She is a nationally certified paralegal, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. She does a lot of advocacy work for domestic violence victims and survivors, and she has a day job too. So, a lot going on. But when you do something you're passionate about, then it bleeds over into everything. She also is a nonprofit owner called, or nonprofit founder, I should say, Sweet Corner Girl. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that as the months roll by. So, Gina, I always start with the same question. Although many of us may know you because you have been a consistent guest on our podcast, but I always ask, tell us who you are, where you've been, and where you're going. And in particular, tonight, I know we're going to focus on mental health, the legal system, and how those pieces of the puzzle fit together or don't fit together. So we'll start there. Tell us who you are, where you've been, and where you're going, and welcome to everyone out there.
Well, thank you, Tina. It's always great to be here and talk about these issues that seem to affect a lot of us that have been going on for years, and we don't seem to have any resolutions or changes in the system, even though there's been plenty of research and discussions about them and changes in the law and you know, a lot of awareness about domestic violence and the issues of having someone who is controlling, narcissistic type personalities that seem to dominate a lot of the abuse that we've experienced and not being able to get some relief from. So I'm a survivor of domestic abuse. I am one of the lucky ones who escaped with my life. When I sometimes reflect on what I experienced, some of the things that I experienced, I believe that if things had gone a different way, I believe I would have lost my life if I had stayed and if some of the things that happened differently. But it was very painful. It was very difficult to navigate through, especially when you feel that you didn't have much support. There's really not a lot of support for domestic violence, even though it is claimed to be. One of the things that I have found in my experience and experience with other women, and also my research for my degree, was that they have a lot of the knowledge as to why we experience domestic abuse, but there seems to be no pathway that they've carved or created to change domestic violence. We're still hearing every day a report that someone was murdered after they tried to obtain a restraining order or after they obtained a restraining order. We're hearing how women have difficulty still obtaining a restraining order. Recently, in the last couple of years, we've had new laws passed for coercive control. However, it's difficult to obtain a coercive control uh, restraining order, and you have to show at least two examples of coercive control. And what I am finding, and is that they are being used as a weapon, uh, as another form of abuse, and if for women who are trying to escape the abuser.
Now, when you say that, what do you mean that it's being used as a weapon rather than what it was meant to originally hopefully help?
Well, unfortunately, what happens is when there is a domestic disturbance, and that's how they are called before they are. It's classified, but it's called a domestic disturbance by the police officer before it's classified as domestic violence, or whatever they classify it as.
Or a domestic call, some sort
Correct.
of
Right.
domestic call.
Correct. So what happens is, it's a he said, she said. And they encourage both parties separately, because they do take them separately. You have one officer talking to them and the other officer talking, and then they encourage them to get a restraining order. So it is a race to whomever gets to the courthouse first. Oftentimes, a man will get to the courthouse first. Oftentimes that happens. I've seen it more frequently than anything other. Having someone who's truly abused obtain a restraining order. It seems that he's been using that avenue more often. And what I've also found is when a man uses that restraining order to it's usually used as a tool because he knows the relationship is over and that she's going to be filing for separation or divorce, or she's going to be filing, trying to get custody. So it's a big factor when it comes to, uh, a later proceeding such as a divorce or child custody. Because one of the things that we have been falsely led to believe is that once you get a restraining order, you're going to get custody. The judge is going to hear all the abuse. But when you get to family court, it's an end game. They don't care. They don't care. Most states are no fault divorce, so they don't care. They absolutely don't care what he did, what he didn't do, what happened during the marriage. They don't care. What happens now is that they're getting guardian ad litems involved. They're getting other, social psychiatry involved with the children, with the sometimes it's usually with the person who's the victim is having to go through this psychological evaluations and what have you, because he falsely filed a restraining order.
I
And
know in my own situation, Gina, you're also asking the person who is the victim, the person who's been abused, whose brain is not what it once was after
Mhm.
years of abuse, or even in my own particular case, narcissistic sociopathic abuse. You're asking someone to make decisions based on confusion.
Right,
And so it's like it's like I want to file, but but what if this happens, and what if this
right.
happens, and you start playing the, well, what if he says this, then
Mhm.
what do I say? And before you know it, you talked yourself out of filing something. And we both know that filing a restraining order in the end may not protect you if
Right,
they are truly psychopathic.
right,
So you're like, it's like you're playing a game and you don't even know how to play.
right. And one of the things is when the National Institute of Justice did a comprehensive uh, study on real cases of domestic violence, and they looked at all, um, I can't even think right now, but they looked at all different aspects of it. When they truly investigated domestic violence, they often found that it was the man was the perpetrator. In most cases, even if the woman was arrested. And one of the things that they stated was that when you have a town or a city or a state who has a larger portion of women who are being arrested for domestic violence, you
Mm,
really need to investigate that town, city, state,
wow.
because of the fact that it's domestic violence is usually perpetrated by a man.
That
So,
makes sense.
correct.
That
And
makes a lot of sense.
right. And the problem is, and a lot of this is, the problem is, and this is a big problem. And Karen talks about this a lot.
Mm,
Reactive abuse.
yes.
And I don't think it's abuse. It's you have someone who is constantly in your face, who's constantly pushing you, abusing you, and you punch back. They're in your face and you punch back, and you are, instead of being, well, he was in my face, telling me that I was lazy, and I was sick, throwing up, vomiting, and he doesn't care. He does not care that you're sick, because when you're an abused person, you don't have a right to be sick. You don't have a right to sit down. You have to be on call at all times, at their beck and call. And when you threaten to do anything, back to them, in response to them not being able to control their own behavior, step back and control themselves, and you're in a heated argument with them, and they're just not backing down, or just leaving you to be, that's and you strike back. That's when, you know which came first,
Hmm.
him calling you names, telling you that you're fat and lazy, calling other names, that you hear.
And
I
in
mean,
those moments is when they get to say, then, I told you she was crazy. I
exactly,
told you
because
she was this. I
right,
told you she was that. I told you this is what she
sure.
wanted, you know? So,
And I do have it in my research, and I have to come up with. I'm going to have to go through my research, Tina, because this one of the things that did come out of when I complained about the judge, to the Judicial Qualifications Commission, when she went into court, when I was trying to get the restraining order, after she released my records to my ex-husband and he was torturing me with them. One of the things that came out, because I was hoping that she would be reprimanded for doing what she did to me, but what she did, and this is what a lot of them do, smoke and mirrors, is she created a task force for domestic violence.
mm,
And one of the things that came out, it was a big newspaper print, which I have to pull it out of my research, was this the different, when a police officer does come upon a person who's been abused, the man calls the police. He has been, threatening to take her children. He's going to call CPS. He's going to do all these things to her. He's going to call her work. He's going to call her father. He's going to call all these people in all these places that he knows that would be afraid of,
mhm.
because he's going to smear her name. He's going to slander her, and he's going to take her children. And so she by the time the cops get there, she's panicking. She's in a panic. She's talking a mile a minute because she's telling them all that he's done to her in the past, you know, half an hour, but then going back to the past 6 weeks, and of the little incidences they had with him, or whatever. And so what they concluded was there's three types, and I can't recall all of them, but one of them was like a snake, the other one was a pit bull, and I can't remember what the other one was, but I'm pretty sure there was, like, they categorized them into three different uh categories as to how he manipulates
Mm.
the scenario, so that when the police do come, she is a raving, she's responding to what he just did to her, and he's calm and cool, and is a
That's what
cucumber.
I was going to say.
It's
And
kind of like
they
what we
have a
saw
mask
with
on,
Gabby. We saw
calm,
that with
cool.
Gabby. We saw that with Gabby.
Hmm.
That's exactly, she's got mental health, she experiences, and she admits that she has anxiety.
Mm,
I don't know anybody that doesn't have an anxiety at some time or another. I have
right.
never met anybody that does not have anxiety. I don't care who you are. I've met you. I've talked to you. I see what anxiety looks like.
Right.
So, you know, especially when you're trying, I mean, I just looked at her trying to just she wanted them to understand her. But then what happens is, and we talk about this, is the focus no longer comes about the incident and what he did.
Right.
It came about her mental health.
Well, see, and
And
that's part of the circle, the
right,
circular argument,
correct.
conversation,
And that
cycle,
usually
whatever.
nobody looks at the anger that he expressed. Nobody looks at that aspect of it, which is an emotion. It's like one of the things that was really troubling to me was I always got my former husband's anger. Always. He was always angry and mad about something, but they don't look at that as an emotion. You know what I mean? It's like they don't look at that. They look at my anger as flame and rage, right?
Right.
But they
Right.
look at him like him going, it's like they don't look at how he treats me or anything else as anger.
Well, some of it is, I mean, let's face it, and I'm going to say it, good or bad, right or wrong, real or imagined, right? The patriarchal structure we're in.
Mhm. Right.
Men are the stronger, seen as the stronger individual
Mhm.
and the more in control
Mhm.
individual of their emotions individual. They're the ones who are the working person of the family. And we have all these gender roles that, whether we are living them or not, we still believe them. We've bought into them. They are
Mhm.
something that we have grown up with culturally.
Mhm.
And therefore, we see a woman who's emotional, and it starts very young.
Mhm.
Boys will be boys, girls will be girls. Don't be mean to him. He just likes you.
Mhm.
Then we go through when a woman when a young girl becomes a woman through her cycle, then we
Mhm.
dismiss, oh, you're just being hormonal. It's
Mhm.
just that time of the month. We just dismiss their emotions as
Mhm.
unimportant, and we explain away as though they don't have real feelings because they're angry, upset,
Mhm.
mad, crying. We just dismiss that. But yet, the man who is more in control of his emotions, we give them value. And
Mhm.
that's where the catch 22 of the legal system and the mental health stigma, which we talked about off live. How in the world can we want someone to admit they need help for a struggle that is normal, and yet we then stigmatize the struggle with a label called depression?
Mhm.
But then we treat the depression as though it is a negative versus what we say as she's crazy in an abuse. It's like you're not allowed to be, I mean, it's kind of like being arrogant or cocky
Mhm.
or being confident. The
Right.
words matter. We play with the language. It's like if you're arrogant, you're a jerk. But if you're confident, that's a good thing. But
Right.
but there's a fine line between the struggle that's normal and you're depressed,
Mhm.
and then some sort of clinical depression. But
Right.
we couple them all together, and we label everybody something, and then you're labeled something to where you're what, then devalued because you admitted something.
Right. And the thing too, Tina, that you talk about is, you know, um, when you have experienced any kind of abuse, what often happens is if you, first of all, usually someone who experiences abuse is predisposed to experience abuse later in life. Someone who came from a family of domestic violence, their mother and father were uh, the mother was in a domestic violence situation that she may or may not have left. Any kind of abuse situation, you are predisposed to uh, being in another relationship with the same aspects. Um, so, one of the things about being in an abusive relationship like that, you relive to the beginning of time. A lot of times you go back to the beginning of your time and saying, how did I get myself into this? How I told myself that I would never ever ever allow anybody to hit me. I would never ever ever anybody allow anybody to talk to me. That was the way my father talked to me. I'm never going to allow another man in my life that I have control over, because I was 10 and I had no control over him backhanding me at 10 because he didn't like what I said when I asked a question. I will never, ever, ever allow that to happen. But because we are predisposed, we're more likely to fall into those kind
Right.
of situations. Um, but, it takes a lot of healing to go through domestic violence. And when you're still in that dynamic of domestic violence, and now you're dealing with either the judicial system because you're going through a divorce or because he had you arrested, you got all those other factors that dump onto it. And so, I mean, we all have to go if you are a healthy person, regardless of what you've been through in your life, chances are you are a healthy person. When we come across domestic violence, it it's not normal. It's an abnormal occurrences. You know, it, you it's not a matter of, I believe, you become depressed. I think you become self-reflective. And so you need actually that extra time, because when we become self-reflective, we're either going to do one of two things. We're either going to brood on it and overthink it and just think over and over what how did that happen? How did I let that happen? What he did this to me. He did this to me. Or you can start thinking of your solutions and how you're going to get out of this. How am I going to get out of it? And closing off the world sometimes is what you got to do. I know that I could not listen to the news. I could not listen. What happens is, one of the things that they don't look at when it comes to these abusive situations is they put people in. You need to be around people, but the problem is when you're dealing with an emotional traumatic event like that, you become over stimulated. And when you're overstimulated and you're put in a group of people that are overstimulated and they have their own problems, they're in a different portion of their recovery, and you put a brand new person in there, you know just came out of an abusive situation, and nobody's believed them up till then either. They still don't believe you. It has nothing to do with what happened to you. It has to do with how you're reacting to it. How dare you stay in bed for 4 days? You can't do that. Something's wrong with you if you stay in bed for 4 days. Your body probably needs it because you've been going on fight or flight or freeze.
For so long.
Yeah, for an extended period of time. That is not normal. You're always on eggshells. You're always on guard because you're not sure if you wear that outfit to work and he sees you in it, is he going to get pissed off at you because you wore that outfit? And he certainly thinks that you wore that outfit for somebody else at the office. You know what I'm saying?
I often say that my permanent demeanor now is side eye with rose colored glasses. Like I still want to believe the world is all good,
Mhm.
but I have a side eye waiting.
Right. Yeah, you're always on. You're always on guard. You've got your sidearm on you all the time because you just, how am I going to have to pull a MacGyver to get out of this? What do I have to do?
Hey, let's talk about my boy. I was a good MacGyver. Well, and
Exactly.
that's where again, the legal system. We talked about it earlier. You're the first one to the courthouse. Okay, my brother will say, you can piece of paper will lie still, let you write whatever you want to on it. So let's say the victim gets there first.
Okay.
The victim fills out the EPO, emergency protection order, domestic violence,
Mhm. Mhm.
whatever they call it in your state or jurisdiction. If you're the victim, then the abuser makes you look like a liar. And if the abuser gets there first, then he's got all his ducks in a row and you're the crazy one.
Right.
So, as a victim, standing outside of or trying to fight inside the system called the legal system, it's almost like there's no way to win because it's like
Mm.
if I play the game, I have to admit struggle. And if I don't play the game and I admit nothing, then I'm a liar.
Mhm.
So, I mean, this is how your
Mhm.
client ended up in a catch 22 and we're going to
Right.
do the evaluation because you stood up in court and you stood up in court because they were not telling the truth. But it's like
Correct. And they
you're
don't.
already the
Right.
bad guy.
Right. It's, yeah, it's exactly right. It's, policemen, whatever they write in their report, whether they have the cameras now or not, a lot of times they
They
can't find the
don't.
cameras. You
They
can't
turn it
find them
off.
anymore. They've in family laws, they seem to just, they didn't record correctly or something happened, right? So, a lot of that important information, what the truth is, it's your word against theirs.
It's a he said, she said.
He
Yeah.
said, she said in that situation too. And so, and what I find too, and they're just rubber stamping these, and I think I've talked about this before. They're hurting everybody in. You go to family services, whether you're guilty or not. You go, agree to go through their program. You go before the judge after, and the judge will, allow you to go to the program. They may put other considerations on it, restrictions on it. And it's it's almost like a violation of your constitutional rights. And Kelly did mention that she felt like that was, and she kept, uh, she kept denying, she kept, not agreeing to these pleas that they were, imposing on her. And one of the things that, I noticed in the courts was because of the fact that she stood up for herself and she said no, they take that as an offense instead of it like she's practicing her constitutional rights. It's almost like, how dare you, how dare you. And now this goes to somebody who does not have the funds to hire a private attorney. If someone had the funds to hire a private attorney, things would be totally different.
Yeah, so sometimes your first crime is your it's of poverty. Your
Exactly.
first criminal offense is you're poor.
Correct. Correct. So, when that happens, what do you do? I know that when in my case, when I was arrested, um, and of course he was not arrested, even though he pushed me out of a moving car. He there's no reason to ever arrest him because he was never arrested, no matter what he did to me. So, uh, what happened to me was, they ordered me to, uh, because I smelled like alcohol, even though I don't drink and I didn't drink. Um, they wanted me to go to a alcohol class, and they also wanted me to go to a batterers class. So I went to both. I presented to go to both, and both places told me, because I was honest with them. Yeah, I did this. Yeah, I did that to him after he did this. Yeah, he had me in a chokehold, so I bit a chunk of his arm off. He shows everybody, that I put a bite mark on his arm, but he doesn't tell anybody that he had me in a chokehold.
Right.
He doesn't tell anybody those
Yeah, the
things.
context is missing, right?
Exactly. So, yeah, I look like I'm awful, but I mean, I was honest with them, and both places wrote a letter to the court saying that I was a victim of domestic violence. I was not appropriate for their program because what I had to say would be detrimental to the people they were trying to help. And it's so true, because I would have been probably going in there, and I would have been saying stuff like, "Yeah, you sound like my ex-husband. He used to give me that lie too." So, I didn't drink. So how can you have somebody go into a program who doesn't drink, just because, you know, I did smell like alcohol, because he wished me happy anniversary, and I couldn't see my children, and I hadn't been able to see my children for weeks. And so I lost it. And because he's blaming me, his family is telling me to go make friends. Your children don't need you, go make friends. And, I was at my wit's end. I mean, no, the courts one of the things that the courts are famous for is the person who does get custody of the child, and this has got to change. You wouldn't be in the court aspect of it if they were playing nice in the sandbox. You know what I mean? One of the things that the courts need to stop doing in these cases is they need to stop giving the allowance of the person who has the restraining order, has custody of the kids, to uh, allow the other parent to see the children. My ex-husband would never allow me to see the children. That was my punishment for leaving him. Children are used as punishment with narcissistic people and psychopaths and sociopaths. They want you, they want to take what hurts you most, what would hurt you most. Those are the buttons they push. They don't, they want to see you cry. There seems to be some disconnect with our judicial system and the mental health system on that aspect of family dynamics. You know, the when you have two people who are in a family domestic problem, you know, you cannot leave the allowance of how they get to see the children up to that person.
Right.
You can't do that, because that person will make every excuse as to why you can't see the children, because that is their ultimate goal to begin with. That is their ultimate goal. So when you have someone who, it's like I want, I wanted to, when I wanted the divorce from my husband, I went to 3 attorneys. One of them was my teacher, a professor I had at school. And I didn't like him at first. And now I know why I didn't like him. My first instinct and gut was why was what was telling me not to like this guy. Right. But one of the things about, that I kept telling the attorneys that I interviewed to help represent me was, look, the marriage is over. I don't want to fight with him. I want to share the children. I want to split the property. I just want to move on with my life. He's made it abundantly clear to me by how he treats me, the fact that he's never around, the fact that he says derogatory things to me, the fact that he abuses me, the fact that he, says some of the things he does. It just makes it very clear to me that he does not want to be in a marriage. He does not want to be with me. He does not want to be with our children either.
Right.
So I just want a divorce. I don't want to fight with him. I just want to split everything down the middle. But when it wasn't, oh, is that what you want? We're going to give you the opposite. You're going to have a run for your money. When you have someone who is allowed to infiltrate your life that deep, because he was able to get therapy records of intimate. I am so glad that I wasn't didn't tell him everything, in therapy. I'm so glad that I didn't tell him everything, because he would have really, really, really
He'd have had a field day.
exactly. How dare you? And it's bad enough when you have to deal with somebody who blames everything. Whenever you have an issue between you two in the marriage, it's bad enough to have somebody who blames it on your time of the month. You're crazy. You're a woman. You're this. You're that. And to have a whole group of people behind him doing the same
You
things.
basically agree.
They're critiquing how you say things. They're critiquing how, you care for your children. They're critiquing everything that he was doing to you too. And now you have a judge. Now you have, a prosecutor and all these people who know, and they make it very clear when they do these things. It makes it very clear that they know nothing about domestic violence. They have no idea what they're doing. And it's like why I tell people, why I tell women, you really need to be careful on who you tell when you talk about your
Well,
abuse,
I was going to
especially when
say,
you talk about the intimate details of what exactly happened to you. You really should not be telling anybody
right.
what the intimate details of the abuse were, unless you are going to be prosecuting your abuser to the 10th degree. One of the things that was the hardest thing that I did, hardest thing that I had to listen to when I worked for an attorney who prosecuted uh, the Department of Children and Families in Florida. One of the hardest things that I had to do was prepare documents and listen and take the testimony of these young girls and boys, but mostly girls, and they had to tell me intimately what happened to them. And one of the things that a lot of abusers do, and they don't seem to understand this in that system. They're not sensitive to it. They don't look at the fact that abuse and is very sensitive, and it's very personal. They make it so impersonal, and like it's an everyday thing to people, and it really does affect someone's well-being and someone's life in a profound way, and they're not sensitive to it in any way.
Well,
And
it's that old saying, just the facts, ma'am. We just
correct.
want you to tell what happened, but they forget to let you tell this has forever changed my life and the direction my life is going in.
Correct. And
I
it
mean,
does. It stops doing that.
not only have you lost your innocence,
Mhm.
your rose-colored glasses, whatever, but you have lost the path that
Correct.
innocence and those rose-colored glasses might have taken you to. So you,
And one of the things too that I want to point out, and it's been when we had our last discussion, Tina, it popped in my mind. When you have an abusive person, okay, such as I did with my husband, he knew there was a lot of family history with abuse. He knew that, okay? And light bulbs should be going off in our judiciary's head, in prosecutors, and also in our public defenders and other attorneys, other people that work in the judicial system. They should have light bulbs going off, okay? Because they don't even think about the fact that a lot of abuse happens within families, okay? Uncle, Uncle Joe, and I'm just using this, I don't have an Uncle Joe, okay? Abused that child when they were a child, okay? It may not be something that they ever spoke about. Or maybe they did tell one family member that they felt they could trust, that would never tell anybody else, but you thought that that family member would be your kind of safety wing. You can go to the other family member about Uncle Joe, okay? So what happens when you have to when you get into these family services positions and they demand you reveal your records, they're not sensitive to this stuff. Besides that, you may have spoken about this 15 years ago to a therapist or whatever, you know, and for them to just take all that information that you had from, a time in your childhood and having to deal with it now in a family case because they want to know everything. It's like, you don't have a right to know everything. I'm sorry. You just don't. You don't have a right to open up closed books, closed chapters in my life just because I have a psychopath that I married. Unfortunately, you know why? Because I did not have a good foundation. I did not have strong people in my family or, people that were supportive of me. I had a family of narcissists or sociopaths, or psychopaths that I was dealing with, and so what you're doing is you are basically leaving that person again at those people's mercy. And you're taking the person who's the victim, they're being re-victimized and re-victimized through the system. And the thing is that they do have if a person's been raped, they have I can't remember what I, I can't remember what the law is, but I'm sure that there's a group of women who are going to talk about what the exact law is after I do this podcast because we know who they are, right? But there
Right.
is a law that it's a rape shield law, okay? Where when a woman has been raped, they cannot bring her sexual history into any prosecution of a perpetrator. So it's a rape shield law. So uh but there's no safeguards in that when it comes to our family law. It just seems like it's a free for all. It's a bunch of bulldozers in there, and they all have the appearance. When you're in that system, they all have the appearance of working together instead of being instead of there being a protection, a layer of protection between the prosecutor and you know the person who's accused, but they don't even know if like the woman that I've helped recently, her name is Kelly. She she was the true victim, I believe, from all that I've read, from all that I've seen. But they don't even care if that's the fact. They don't even care if that's the case. He filed a restraining order. The restraining order was dismissed because it lacked substance.
Right.
It didn't meet the criteria. All he basically did was state that he was would you expect somebody who's making up a false report to say, just making up just one line allegation, you
Mhm.
know, and of
They
course,
either it takes two scenarios.
exactly,
Either they have lots of details,
exactly,
and you're looking at this going, how, why did you do that if you also did this? So they either try to hide the lie behind lots
right,
of details or no details.
yes,
It's one or
yes,
the other.
exactly, yeah. I'm living in a narcissistic house is basically what it would say. But then of course, because every man does this, every single allegation that I've ever seen with a man, including my own, was that a woman is mentally unstable. They all do it. And if she has ever had any type of counseling in her life, that is brought up like
Right,
it's a bad thing. And
right,
then, of course, they want her to go to counseling on top of it. They don't care that she's in counseling or that they don't care. They don't care. It seems that they want to have the opportunity to sit on their, the bench with their gavel, and they want to now order you to more psychiatric care, more evaluations. They don't care that you have already been going for whatever reason, for the domestic violence, for whatever else. They don't care. And one of the things that we all know as survivors is that the abuser will never step foot, not one day, into a therapist's office. We all
Well,
know that.
and the problem is that if you're trying to prove your if you're trying to prove your way in, you can't prove your way out, and if you're trying to prove your way out, you can't prove your way in. It's like you're
Yeah,
caught between.
because they
It's
don't
like, well,
care.
if I admit I have struggles, then
Mhm.
I'm automatically crazy, and if I
Right.
don't admit I'm crazy, then I must be lying and I'm manipulating. It's
Oh, of
like you
course.
can't win for losing. Let me read a couple comments. It says the woman is so often upset from the emotional and sometimes physical abuse that she is delayed getting to court in order to file the restraining order. Us many times she has the children to care for. Meg says, "Good job, ladies. We'll come back to watch." And now she says, "Great to see you both." She came back. The story of how the police treat women on the domestic violence or loud voices call needs to be shared. Thank you all for sharing this. That was a Facebook user. Um, and then we have to, you add to it. It's I mean, the court system is a great sandbox for an abuser to play in, whether it's the
Mhm.
high conflict divorce, whether it's the she's unstable, she's the abuser, um, because they want to be objective. They, like we said, just facts, but they don't ever look behind those facts to see any other picture. Um, and that is where I get stuck, because it's like, what can we do to open the eyes of the judicial system and those who walk into the judicial system thinking somehow it's really on their side?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
you're
is
right.
and it isn't, because I know in my own situation I went to file the EPO and I knew nothing what to expect.
Mhm.
I tried to be very strong, but I
Right.
cried. I tried to explain what happened, and I realized that so much of what I was sharing didn't make any sense because
Mhm.
I had no context associated with it, because I was opening my mouth for the first time
Right.
to say it all. And I barely even knew what I was saying or what to share, or what not to share, or how
Mhm.
to share it, or anything. I just wanted someone to hear me for the first time.
But
The life I had been living was a life I hadn't recognized, that
mhm.
I didn't know what to do to
Yeah.
get out of it. I don't even know how I got into it. And
Right.
yet there I was, standing in that courtroom
Right.
with that black robe staring at me, asking me these questions
Mhm.
that I didn't even know the answers to myself.
Mhm. And a lot of times too, most women who are abused, they don't want their partner in trouble.
Right.
The ones that, the sociopaths and the psychopaths, okay, who use it in a devious manner, because I've seen this before. They want right. Those are the ones who want uh them, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Most women that I know of, that I've worked with, who um they just want that person to stop and leave them alone. You know what I mean? Just have them stop and leave me alone. I don't want to press charges. That's why when one of the reasons why they instituted it's no longer in her, she does no longer has the choice. The state takes over.
Right.
And that's a lot of it, part of it,
Right.
you know, um, because she doesn't really want, I didn't want my husband in trouble when I was with
Right.
him. I just wanted him to stop. I called his parents, but then I was chastised by the court for calling his parents and not the police. But instead of me, shame on you, ma'am. What's wrong with you, ma'am? You should have called the police. Well, I didn't want to call the police. I did not want him in trouble. I wanted him, to grow up
You're right.
and to stop being abusive. But instead, what I got is, you know, you're gonna have I'm gonna put you through that black hole of hell that, you know, I
And
want to
when
see.
they say it,
Because I
they
see the
mean
light.
it.
Huh?
When
I'm
they
sorry.
say it, they mean it.
Exactly.
Because again,
'Cause he got the light out of it. It made him giggle like a girl.
they've
It
learned
made
how
him
to
giggle like a
manipulate.
girl.
Hmm. Well, we're coming up on the hour, and I know that Gina and I will never finish a
No.
conversation with necessarily solutions, but we always, it's reflective. As you have said before, oftentimes these conversations are reflective. I feel like there's someone out there who's listening who realizes that something isn't quite right and they haven't put their finger on it. And to some degree, they don't have their voice yet and they're
Mhm.
afraid to put their finger on it.
Correct.
And, having these conversations, it makes you realize that as much as you never own the abuse, there does come that moment when the reflection means I own myself, I own my boundaries, I own my respect, and what I demand from you. And if something is toxic, no matter what the reason is, narcissistic, toxic, alcoholic, it doesn't matter what the toxicity is, what its final label is, save yourself.
Mhm.
But in saving yourself, um, be careful, as Gina said earlier, be careful what you share and who you share it with. Um, don't spend a great deal of time defending the lies,
Mhm.
because the truth will bear out. Unfortunately, like with your client, they actually spent some time um, in a mental health facility trying to,
She was protecting her rights. I mean,
yeah,
and it seems like when that happens, when you stand up for your rights, especially women, the
mhm,
game is on for you, especially with
right,
mental health. What do you mean you're not gonna agree to our plea? Well,
right, right.
I don't think you understand your charges, and so we're going to now assist you for 6 months, and we're gonna put you in a facility, and we're gonna beat you down until by the time you're ready, to come back here and face me, you're gonna agree to the plea that I imposed upon
Yeah,
you.
we'll hold you in contempt of court until you give us the information you
Exactly, and
want.
I totally
It's
believe it's a
legal.
violation of our constitutional rights, and it's something I believe that, it's a it
It's
just
basically it's legal
it's based on false
blackmail.
charges.
But
Mhm.
it's all, it's like it's legal blackmail.
Well, yeah,
Legal blackmail. It's like you tell us what we want to know and we'll consider something else. But until
exactly.
then, what we've
It's
got
like
you
they get
on is
angry. It's like
right.
they get angry at the truth. I'll tell you,
Hmm.
Tina, there's a couple things I wanna say before we wrap up.
Go ahead.
I had a very, very, very hard time in my divorce for whenever my ex-husband's attorney said something I didn't like, to not turn around and say, "What's the matter? You got your period?" Or or say to him, or call him, the C word. I wanted to do all of those things. I wanted to do it to the judge when she was like not acting right, because or saying what I wanted her to say, or just going along with him, because that's what I would have to endure when
Right.
I was listening
Right.
to this stuff.
No, I
And it's
agree.
like I know for a fact if I had done that, they would have had me handcuffed and out of there so quickly. And but they don't, it's like they're totally oblivious to what is experienced in these homes, you know? They're
Right.
totally oblivious to it.
Well, we have another comment. It says, I don't want to mess up anyone's background check. But once it's a repeat situation, you have to call the cops. This is a friend of mine. Um, and I was, Becky, I was manipulated the other way.
But, you know, the
You
thing is,
never
like we
call
talked
the
about,
police.
the police are more than likely going to say the same thing, especially if it's a verbal argument.
Right.
Okay? Because most men know now that they can't punch you in the face because they know that they're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Even still, that's not true because there's still women who are physically assaulted or the partner is not getting arrested or he's left by the time the cops get there.
Well,
But
and I do think that,
but the problem is, and we've talked about this, is the fact that they're going to tell both parties to go file a restraining order. Both parties, regardless of what was determined,
well,
because
as
it's
you
a
said,
shit
that's
show.
when it becomes it's like with rape, it's like with the divorce, it's like with cheating. It's he said, she said, and nobody wants to mess with it. Like it's messy. And it's like, it's messy. That may be true, but it's messy because more than likely someone is lying and someone is telling the truth. And nobody wants to take the time to really figure that out. They just
Right.
want
They
to
don't
look at
de-escalate
it,
it.
make a determination. Um, and for the first time, I am proud to say Gina has been rethinking the statement defund the police. So that's going to have to be another conversation,
Yeah.
Gina, because I've been on that case for a while.
Yeah, huh?
Um,
Well, you know, they need to put them in some programs that are
right.
realistic and that are
Defund
not
the police.
that they need to be used to de-escalate these systems. And I also believe that when there is a domestic violence, especially when the man is the perpetrator, that they really absolutely need to be watch him
Right.
after, however you have to do it, because that's the time when he's most likely going to kill her. Most physical abuse is done after the restraining order because there's usually just been threats. But after the restraining order,
Right.
that's when she's going to be physically assaulted or she's going to lose her life. And he's going to take his own life too, because we know that 93% of the men who kill their partners kill themselves. And it's mostly men who do this. So I know that people are very partial to men as being the victims, but it's not very likely. It's
The
not as likely as
statistics are
it is
not
for women.
there.
Correct. And,
Um,
you know, I'm not a man hater. I want to make that clear. I don't hate men. I just, I would like to see them, you know, seriously get the help that they need. You know, it's confidential. It really is. It's confidential. And if I'm okay with you going in as John Doe and paying
right.
cash and
Right.
going, say, look, I want to punch my wife sometimes. I say nasty things to her. I don't like myself after I say them, but I don't tell her that. You know, my mom, I saw my mom getting beat up, you know, and I was just taught that that was the thing to do. It's wrong. It's wrong. Domestic abuse is learned behavior. Okay. It's learned behavior. You had to learn it from somewhere. You know, a lot of the men who do abuse their wives, they witnessed their father doing it and they some of them may have said I was never going to do that to my wife, but they find themselves doing it.
But
Or
also, Gina, not just, but remember, we are not. I mean, we are groomed by our family
we are. Yeah.
history and past, but we
Sure.
are also groomed by our society and by religion and
That's
by
true.
the social, economic,
Mhm.
racial, judicial, educational systems as well,
Mhm.
and all of them, whether you
Right.
want to believe it or not, have been dominated patriarchally.
Right.
And therefore, we got a lot to break down. One one at a time. As my friend Gina once said, it takes 100 years to change a norm.
It takes 50
Yep.
to 100, 200 years.
And every day that we don't
Mhm.
change the thinking, we continue the norm for another day.
Correct. Mhm. In the
So
society. Mhm.
that's a lot. That's a lot. I want to say, give you a moment. Um, I want to rein in. We're coming to the end. I want to thank TikTok for watching. Thanks for the love and the likes and the shares. I've seen a lot of shares. Um, I see a lot of likes. I really appreciate that. It
Thank
helps get
you.
the feed out. It helps get the conversation going. I also want to say you've been watching Love Over Coffee, Voices Not Heard. In October, we did 31 nights. It's during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It gets a lot of play. So I want to bring that awareness during those 31 nights. However, it's a conversation that needs to be had more often, not just in October, but when everyone is talking about it is when we also talk about it. Um, we have 2 nights a month that we will be featuring different guests, different conversations. And so this is a podcast and a platform for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And out of this podcast has come a subscription box. That subscription box is focused on self love and self care and healing trauma. And through information and knowledge, practices, and items within the box, it gives you a chance to self care and self love, reflect, those kinds of activities. So if that is something you're interested in, message me. My box is open on TikTok. I have the Real Change page on Facebook. I have a couple of groups on Facebook, and of course, my personal page as well. And then, of course, we're live on YouTube at the same time. Um, Gina, any final thoughts and where the conversation might go next? Because I know you maybe were thinking of a date in February as well, which I'm
Sure.
open to. So
That's great. Thank you.
thank you, Kim,
Um,
too.
I think I want to say what I always say, and I said it just a moment ago too. The most dangerous time for a woman is when she leaves or when she is left. If you are making plans to leave your partner, do not tell them you are planning to leave. Do not say you're getting a divorce. Do not leave hints or pamphlets around. Do not leave your number to where the domestic violence companies can call you back and he sees it. If it's possible to leave the house, use a friend's phone if you have one, or somewhere else use, or delete the information when you have it, especially if they have control over your phone. um, because that is when, just like, when you call the police, they're going to tell both of you to file a restraining order, and you might find that they're going to be taking actions, making false allegations and doing things that you're not aware of, because you're less likely to be the one who is trying to harm the other person. You're just wanting to escape, where they're more into harming you, smearing your name, gathering their flying monkeys. In my case, my husband was calling my extended family members that he knew that I was not very close with, and he was calling them people that I felt were supportive to me in some small fashion, but I felt they were still supportive to me. He was calling them, and then of course, there goes my support system, which is that is the number one thing that they're trying to do. They're going to go to your friends. They're going to talk bad to you about your friends first, and then they're going
In
to
order to isolate you,
correct, right. They're going to reach out to your friends behind your back, and they're going to call them, and then he's going to try to, you know, create a narrative to get your friends to believe that, something is wrong with you, especially if you're a woman, because they're going to say that you are mentally unstable. That is the number one action against a woman in a family law case, family case. Or the next step too, the one that they like to do is call CPS on you, and that is used. And CPS has laws are being passed all over the country that if too many calls are made to CPS or to police, CPS is going to get involved, and they're going to come in and take your children. Um, and that happened to me a couple of times with my ex. Tried doing that with me, and it's a vengeful move. It's a vengeful move. And I implore anybody, when you are going to be calling CPS on someone, you better really, really, really evaluate yourself, because that CPS is one of the hardest. It's just as bad as having your abuser call. CPS is one of the hardest to overcome. We talked about this before. They change the goalpost all the time. You reach a mile, they're going to change it. They're going to change it, and they're going to change it. And you're never, ever, ever going to be good enough to have your children returned to you. In most cases, it's very rare that you do get your children back
And
eventually.
a lot of times you get them back because, honestly, to some degree, they never wanted them in the first place, and they're really kind of a bother at this point.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm going to tell you something, Tina. I I I was in the system for a while. It's not a fun place to be. And you may think that you're harming your partner, but you're destroying your children. And I've spent my entire life with people telling me how much they don't like me. Well, I'm a product of I am the poster girl for your foster care. If you don't like me and what I had to overcome and what I had to go through, and having to put myself through life, if you don't like me, well, then don't do it to some other family or other person,
But
unless
so
you.
many times they were. So, what I mean is, so many times they were an absent parent,
Mhm.
or an uninvolved parent. But
Right.
in the divorce, man, they paint the
Mhm.
completely opposite picture.
Mhm.
When really, at the end of the day, they don't want them. They don't
Yeah.
want the children. It's just
Well,
something to play. It's a pawn.
right. Well, my father didn't want us either. So he called CPS on us. So that's how that got started. So, you
Mhm.
know, it was really difficult. It was very, because you don't feel wanted by these families either. Most of
Right.
these children get bounced from family to family to family to family. And it's really difficult. And it's not a
That's
fun
another
place to be.
layer of trauma.
Right. It's not fun. It's not a fun place to be.
Right.
Most foster families are not equipped to deal with abuse. They're not equipped for it,
Right.
and it's another place. And if I can reach one foster child or some child or anybody who's dealing with abuse, you have to be very, very, very selective as to whom you trust with that information. You really do, because you might find out that you're going to walk right into another landmine.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really a sad state of affairs, a lot of cases. I hate to sound so doom and gloom, but
No, well, and we have another.
it's a matter of self-protection. We almost have to protect ourselves in some way and be smart about how we seek help for abuse. Um, you know, I think it's a serious issue. And another, this is one thing that was told to me: when you deal with abuse, okay, you're often told, you know, if you mention one word about how I abused you or what I abused, you know, you're going to suffer even more abuse, right? So, one of the things that we as survivors we learn is that you do one of two things: you either tell nobody, or you go through a period of telling everybody. And what that is that even a stranger walking on the street who says hello, how are you? You engage in a conversation and you tell them everything that you just experienced, and that is what abuse does to you. You either tell nobody or you end up telling everybody because you're looking for someone to listen to you and hear
And
you.
to believe you.
And
Yeah.
yes, and it's hard to find because there's not a lot of people out there unless you've experienced it yourself who will understand. They will label you, they will call you crazy, they will say you have emotional problems, you have anxiety, you need to see a doctor and you need a pill. And that may be true on the temporary, but it should not be a lifelong sentence. And
And we
and
have to think about kids. Kids often are taken in by the wrong
correct.
parent because the parent has manipulated. And it can take a while for. And I was just talking to a friend of mine about this. The maturity of the child who begins to figure out what's going on has already been impacted by what was being done or not done, or what was being said or not said. And those are relationships with the right parent
Mhm.
that was impacted by the wrong parent. And
Correct.
that can still take a long time to figure out, because relationships with parents can be difficult anyway
Exactly.
at a certain
Exactly the
age. And now you've
point.
got this other layer on top of it where one parent is being thrown under the bus by the other one.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's hard for the kid to figure out who's really telling the truth, and not
Right.
even realizing that really they're they're being manipulated in
Right.
some ways.
Most children don't understand that they're being abused.
Right.
They don't. They don't understand it. They just think that mommy's mad at daddy, and you know, they a lot of times they're shielded from what's really going on. A lot of times, or they're just getting one story, or they're just seeing one part of it.
Mhm.
It's true. It's
So someone says, based on my point, which is not to say I'm the only point or that I'm always right, but it
yeah,
says, my daughter was returned from her dad's because his girlfriend felt that my daughter was being a nuisance for her children.
sure, of course.
Um, so, Gina, as always, I love you.
Love you too.
You're a great guest.
Thank you.
We'll be back at some point in time, I have no doubt. There's always an aspect of this that comes out that I didn't think about before. I want you to find out what the three animals are: the pit bull.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look through my
Because
research.
because I that can make sense. There's something about that that makes sense.
Yeah,
Because there are lots of ways to play the game.
right.
And that's why I say, and I learned early on, many people call me passive because I didn't play the game the way the abuser thought I should or would or could,
Mhm.
because he's manipulating. And if you spend all of your time defending your truth,
Mhm.
it actually can make their lies almost seem possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is a very strange place to find yourself in. Is
Yeah.
that as you are trying so hard to prove your way out of the paper bag, you're actually getting deeper into the paper bag,
Yeah.
and then you really can't get out of it. So,
Mhm.
as we both said, be careful. Be careful
Mhm.
what you share, how you share, when you share, how much you share. It is a sad reality of a
Mhm.
narcissistic narcopath side, the
Yeah.
psychopath or the sociopath side. And I don't know where that line is, and I don't know what makes them cross from one to the other.
Mhm.
why they stay one and not become the other. But I think
Yeah.
if they're capable of one, they're actually capable of both. And so when you're getting ready to leave this kind of relationship, as Gina said, tell no one, make a
Yeah.
plan, tell no one, and when the time is right, you do it.
Yeah.
Um,
Make sure it's a viable plan. Yeah.
mhm. Make
One
sure it's a
that you're
viable plan.
safe.
There are agencies out there that can give you burner phones. I wish there were more agencies out there that can help you with some of the financial aspects of not being able to leave a relationship. Those seem to be few and far between at times. Shelters are crowded. So um, make a plan, work it out, reach out to people who've been where you are, because they may have some things that you haven't thought of in some way that you haven't been able to think about it. So I know one of the things is, like I said, the financial aspects of being able to leave is extremely
Very difficult.
difficult to overcome. I
Mhm.
mean, not to mention children and giving up the home and all the things
Mhm.
you love and know, but the financial aspect of being able to leave a relationship when you can barely pay rent, you don't know where your next meal is coming from, your stuff is in storage and you can't pay the bill. I mean, it's a lot to consider when you have been uh,
Mhm.
controlled financially, even if you were the money source. So
Right.
don't think that financial abuse doesn't occur even when you're the money source, because
Right.
it does. Um, you've been tuned in and listening to Love Over Coffee, Voices Now Heard. This is a podcast and a platform for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And I am booking guests for February, and I will keep you posted. Be sure to keep track on the TikTok page and on the Real Change page, Love Over Coffee on YouTube, my own personal page. So, um, thank you for tuning in, and Gina and I appreciate it. And we will
Thank
see
you.
you back.
Have a
All
good
right.
night.
So I'm going to say goodnight on TikTok first. So good night, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for the love, likes, and shares. Okay. I think I said goodnight on TikTok. And now I'm going to come over here and let's see. I don't think we had any other comments. Facebook user says good night. I don't know who the Facebook user is. Sometimes you have to give Facebook the right to use your name in the StreamYard. So, but whoever you are, I think you're probably a frequent flyer. I just don't recognize you tonight. Um, Let me go up here. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you back in a couple of weeks. Have a great night.